So I'm going to hit the online text, which is not listed there. Daddy coming. Un momento. That was probably listed on the front page. Oh, was there, excuse me. All right. So under content, online text, there's Python for everybody. Feel free to follow that link or just watch, run along. Okay, so function calls. We've already talked about functions a little bit. In the context of programming, a function is a named sequence of statements that performs a computation. So here's our function. This is just done at the shell. What is 32? It's an int. So we have built-in functions. We have min, we have max, we have all sorts of built-in functions. Let's play with just a few of these. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open a All right, let's get some data. A is equal to 30, B is equal to 50, C is equal to Joe Bob. All right, let's print the length of C. Let's print the max of C, print the min of C. And the idea of taking the minimum and the maximum of a string is kind of interesting. What it does is it uses their ASCII value, finds the highest value, which ought to be an O. The minimum ought to be a B. And let's make a list out of these two numbers. I'm going to use capital L for list. And we're sticking A and B in that list. And to save time, I'm going to copy all three of these statements, paste them, and replace the C's with capital L's. Oh, so the minimum, excuse me, the max is O, as I expected. The minimum is actually a space. I had forgotten that it was going to check, include the space. Well, why is space less than an O or a B or something like that? If you look at the ASCII chart, then just pick one at random. Then whereas a lowercase a is a 61 hex or a 97 decimal and a lowercase b is a 98, a space is way down here. The punctuation, at least a lot of the punctuation, are tucked below the letters in the ASCII chart. So are numbers. So if you ever sorted a list of words, what would happen is anything that started with a number would show up in front of anything with a capital letter, which would show up in front of anything with a lowercase letter. And you may have seen that. Maybe you did a DIR and you saw the numbers up at the top, and the letters down at the bottom. And it's really aggravating when things are sorted, where they separate uppercase and lowercase independently. So, all your Pink Floyd albums, some of them are down here because you had lowercase p and the others were, So that's kind of annoying, but that's what that is doing. So the minimum was a space, just because that's a ASCII value of 32. The maximum was an O. The length of it was 7. Not surprising. The length of our list was 2. The maximum value in it is a 50. The minimum value of it is a 30. So printing formatted output. There's two ways to do it. And one way I do so often that I forget the syntax of the other one. I'll Google it up real fast or whatever. So print min value is %d, comma, max value is %d, comma, C is %s. So these are placeholders. They're going to get filled in with the variables that we try to print. But we need to give it a list of variables to print, of values. They don't have to be variables. So what I'm going to do is, and since I'm kind of running out of room here, I'm going to go to the next line. You don't need to do that. You can just keep typing on the same line. So what I'm going to print here, but firstly, I need to use a curly brace here. And then I'm going to put in minimum parentheses L, comma, maximum parentheses L, and then this is going to just be the value of C. So C, like that. This is a formatted print statement. Why would you use that? Well, when you're printing out floating point numbers, sometimes it's nice to round them down to 1, 2, or 3 digits, right? If you do 1 divided by 3 and it says 1.333 out to 16 places, maybe you only wanted it to 2 decimal places, like dollars and cents. Here, the %d means integer rather than floating point, so we wouldn't have any decimals. But let's give it a shot. Let's run it. Make sure it works. Ooh.
You need parentheses, not curly braces.
And I need a parentheses at the end of all this. Yeah. And what am I doing wrong?
Parentheses instead of curly braces.
You're right. Because what we are doing is we're defining a tuple. Now that we've talked about tuples, but a tuple is like a list, except it's unmodifiable once you create it. Okay, so there we go. Min value is 30, max value is 50, C is Joe Bob. So in this language, if you're only printing out one value, you don't need to put parentheses around the thing that you're printing. You just put the % sign and you're good to go. If you're using C, C++, if you're using Java, then you would put a comma there rather than a % sign, and you would leave off the parentheses. But they all have similar ideas. Let's use the %f. Print, I don't care what the value is, %.2f, end quote, % sign. Let's just divide A by B, like that. And what do you know? What I do wrong. All right. It's saying that A divided by B is strings. Could have fooled me. But that fixed it. Okay, so even if you're printing one value, I recommend putting it in the parentheses. And so it printed it out to 2 decimal places. Whereas if we chose like 2 values that were sure to have a lot of decimal points, like 10 and or 1 and 3, so it'd be 0.333 repeating. So I just changed those 2 values so that I could run them, and it does it to 2 places. If I wanted more than that, if I wanted 9 places of precision, I would change that %2 to a %9. And you can do more with those formatting placeholders. You can make them right shifted rather than left shifted. You could specify the number of spaces that you want to occupy, which is nice for columns. You know, otherwise if you were trying to print out in columns, it could be a real drag. You know, if some of your numbers were, you know, wider than others. So this is one syntax for printing out formatted output. Excuse me while I look the other one. I believe it's just dot format.
We use dot format in footnotes.
Like that. Okay, so one more. Min. Funny. Whoops, this needed to be in quotes. Min, curly quotes, curly braces, max, curly braces, and then end quote period, format, and then we're going to pass in some values. I don't care what they are, I'm just going to type in some numbers rather than those function names again. And I need a closing parentheses. You never have to space things out like I do. All right. So this is old school. This was introduced, I believe, with Python 3. Whichever one you like is fine. This is the recommended way, you know. This may be deprecated at some point, meaning that they don't promise to support it forever, although I believe that they will. So either one's fine. I tend to use this one just because it looks very familiar to what I do in Java and C, which is these placeholders. Let's give one more example of why you would use the placeholders. Kind of like to do it with the new style. One thing you can do is you can rearrange the order if you wanted to. You could say, I want to print out the first value here and the second value here. And then it would print 3 at that placeholder and it would print 5 at that placeholder. Which is an odd idea, right? But yes, you can rearrange the order in which these things are printed if you use that dot format syntax rather than using the percent signs as your placeholders. Inside these placeholders, you can also specify the width of the fields that you want to print out. So, let's write a little bitty loop for x in range 10, 20, colon. And then let's print. Here's our formatting string. I'm going to go ahead and put the 0 placeholder just to indicate that it's the first one. You don't have to do that. But it's going to occupy 10 spaces, 10 columns. And then that's a closed curly brace. And an open curly brace, and this is placeholder 1, and it's also going to occupy 10 spaces. So end curly brace, end quote, dot format. Sorry guys, I know that I probably need to push this up. And what am I going to print out? I'm going to print out x, and I'm going to print out x to the power of 3. Maybe even x to the power of 4. And I changed my mind. I want to start at 1 and go up to 20. Now, if I wanted to go up to 20, I've already made a mistake. What is this going to count up to?
19.
It's going to count up to 19 because this one stops before it reaches that, or that's the value at which it stops. So I'm going to change that to 21. All right. And as usual, I forgot my trailing parentheses because I see that one and think that I'm done. So one more parentheses there. And there we go. You see that it's evenly spaced them out? If I took those 10s out, we can kind of guess what it would look like. It would not look nearly as nice. I'll do that. I'm going to take that colon 10 out. You don't need to do it because you have some pretty output on your screen already. But if I run it, bleh, you know, doesn't look any good. So that's one reason to use formatted output, to line things up in columns. Another reason is to control the precision. You know, I want nine values after the decimal point. Even if it's a whole number, to just print point followed by 9 zeros. Alrighty guys, for those of y'all who came in later and are typing along, just get to a point where it's cool for you to stop, where you have a running script. Because I can always print this out at the end of the, you know, you don't get graded on by how much you type. So we're good to go. Can we stop now? Not to rush, just want to step onto the next part. And it's okay for y'all not to get everything. These will be uploaded as notes. All right. So type conversion, we've seen this. Convert a value to an int. You can convert a value to a float. You can convert a value to a string. Well, why would I want to do that? If you want to print something out, print hello, comma, C, comma, or A, comma, C, whatever. Nah, just A, comma, B. Then when we run this, it's going to print hello, space, the first value, and then the second one. What if you didn't want spaces? Here's what you would do instead. Print hello plus str A plus str B, like that. All right, so you see what I mean? All right, now we're going to play just a little bit more. What if I have Darth on one line, print Darth, and I have Vader on the other line, and then I really wish they were on the same line? I can do that. Well, yeah, I could edit the print statement. No, but that's not the only way you can do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to modify this one that says Darth, and I'm going to add an end equal parameter to it, an optional parameter. End equals, and I don't want it to go to the next line. By default, if you didn't specify this optional parameter, it would look like /n. So it would print Darth, and then at the end it would print a /n, which will go to the next line. But I don't want it to go to the next line. So I'm taking out this /n by specifying what I want at the end. And if I want a space between the two, because right now if I print it, it's just going to say Darth Vader with no space. You can kind of see why, right? Because the end is just null. I mean, it's empty. So I'm going to put a space there as my end. And then when I print it out, Darth Vader's all going to be on one line with a space between the two names. So random numbers are cool. Random numbers let you write like dice games, or if you're generating a random map for a character to run around on, you know, in a game. or if you want to generate a series of random numbers in order to test your algorithms, they are cool. There are plenty of ways to generate random numbers. What we could do is we could import random, and then if we just call dot random, it gives us a number between 0 and 1, non-inclusive on the 1, which is, you know, like that. But what if you wanted to specify a value like between 1 and 6, you know, so you can make a Yahtzee game, or 1 and 20, so you can do D&D or Pathfinder, or, you know, whatever a 20-sided game is. Or between 1 and 52 if you're doing a card deck. 52, you know, 52 cards in a deck. So just to refresh myself really quickly, I want to make sure I get the punctuation right on the randint. Okay. So remember when I said that there are two styles of importing. You could do this, import random, and then I'm just going to, I'm not going to even print it out. A is equal to random.randint, and I want a value between 1 and 6. And oddly enough, this is inclusive on both sides. You know, every place else in Python, that number is, you know, it would go up to 5, not 6, but here it's inclusive. Or the other style of importing, from random, import randint, B is equal to randint, 1 and 6. And again, it's inclusive, of course. Just reminding you that if you don't feel like typing the module name before every function you call in that module, you can use the from syntax to bring it in. It's not like it makes it run faster or anything. It just is convenient for your typing. All right, so way down there at the bottom. Excuse me, but I'm going to comment out a bunch of stuff because I'm tired of all the input being pushed off the screen. Okay. You know what I need to do? We need to pick this table up and push it a few feet to the right, because some of y'all, the screen gets good. I'm not going to do it right now. I don't want any witnesses when I knock the monitor over. Alrighty. And I didn't print anything, so I don't have any output. So just print A, comma B. And it printed out 2, 1. If I run it again, it should print out other numbers. Now these are not truly random numbers. If you've played with random numbers before, you're probably used to the idea of pseudo-random numbers. Pseudo-random numbers are generated via an algorithm. And given the same input, they would always generate the same series of numbers, which may be great for testing a game or something like that. That number is called the seed. So whatever algorithm it's using, it picks a seed, but you could specify a seed instead. If you didn't specify a seed, it will look random because it's probably using the time, you know, the number of seconds and the number of milliseconds, you know, past midnight or something like that as its seed. I don't know which it does. But it just follows a sequence. So for applications where you truly need random numbers, people go to a lot of effort to figure out how to make truly random numbers. There really is no such thing that you can do just generating on a computer without any external input of any kind. So if we call seed parentheses, I believe it would allow us to set the seed every single time. Let's give that a shot. Random.seed. Let's seed our value to just 1. I'm going to run that and make sure it doesn't blow up. Okay. And let's write a loop that'll print out a bunch of random numbers. For A in range, up to, up to 100. Print randint 1, 1,000. I'm not going to make it 100 because then it'd be harder to see. How about just 10? That'll show, the point that the numbers are the same every time we roll it. All right, so 138 and 780, I can remember those. Run them again, 138, 780. So that created identical series because they all started with the same input into that algorithm. Normally you don't care that these are pseudo-random, but if you ever, like I said, wanted to test a game, make sure and have the numbers generate in the same series every time, like if you're generating random terrain or something like that, and for a while you wanted it to look the same every time you ran it, then you would just specify a seed for it. So we could write a game, Yahtzee, where we were trying to roll 5 5s or, get a straight or that kind of thing, and you'd use a random number generator to do that. Or if you wanted to roll up your Dungeons and Dragons character, use random numbers. All right, I'm going to pause now and make sure that I haven't totally broken. All right, say you have a you have a list of values. Not that we've talked about lists a lot, but most of y'all took fundamentals of Python. You declare a list inside parentheses, and by the way, I want to flip over real quickly to talking about other data types. So if you do this, I'm just going to declare 2 lists. I'm going to scroll this up a little bit, because I think everybody got most of that typed. N1 for a list of names. So Joe, Bob, and Sue. And then I'm going to make another list, but it's not a list, it's a tuple. Parentheses instead of square braces. John, Tony, and Peter. One is a list, the other looks like a list, but it is immutable. So this is what's known as a tuple. Tuple meaning just a set of values that are supposed to be, not tuple. A set of values that are supposed to be tied together. And like if you have a map and it's got XY coordinates or longitude or latitude or XYZ, you would have, a tuple. You're used to the idea of XY back in your geometry days, right? So X coordinate of 30 and a Y, of -3 or whatever. So this is just defining a set of connected data, but once you define it, you can't change it. If I wanted to, I could change N1. N1, the first element in N1 is element number 0, because just about everything you do in computers uses 0-based indexing. Humans start counting at 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If we wanted to be awesome like computers, we'd start counting at 0. So if your preschooler learned how to count to 10 and they started at 0, you know that they have a chip in their brain. So anyways, we're going to change Joe to, I don't know, he changed his name to Joey. And let's print out that list. Print N1. Now the next thing I type is going to introduce a syntax error, so I'm not going to type it right now. I'm going to run it and make sure it works. Okay, so there's our list, and we were allowed to change the first value in the list because a list is not immutable. So I'm going to put a comment up here. Lists are mutable. They can be mutated. Tuples are not mutable, meaning they cannot be changed. The elements in them cannot be changed. When we use that percent sign of formatting, what we really are doing is we're passing a tuple to it. So if we wanted to, we could do this. Print %s, comma, %s, comma, %s. And then after our end quote, put a percent sign and specify into our tuple. And it'll print out the values of that tuple separated by commas. I mean, maybe that's not such a big deal. Maybe that's what you were expecting anyway. So let's change those commas to something else, like 2 colons or question marks. Yeah, %s question mark, %s question mark. Now the question mark doesn't have anything to do with the placeholders. It's going to be part of the output. We're going to see it when we run it. And as always, I almost ran it without tacking on my final end parentheses.
That's one too many parentheses.
Yep, you're right. Now I have too many. Okay. So there we go. All right. So if I can see what it did. See, it printed them out. I was able to format the tuple when I outputted it by using a formatted print. Not quite sure how to accomplish that with the other .format style, but I don't care. Okay, so just to prove that tuples are immutable, I'm going to try to change into the... We already kind of see a problem here, right? Because we created it using this style, and here we are trying to change it with, you know, so Sam. That's going to give me a syntax error. Because into's individual components cannot be changed. And so then you think, well, but you defined it with these parentheses. Why don't we do that? What looks wrong about that? I mean, yeah, it kind of looks right, but it's not. You know,
It looks like a method call.
yeah, it looks like a function, looks like a method. And obviously there is no into method, so that's also going to be a syntax error. Meaning I'm going to delete that line. Yep. It says can't assign to function call. Alrighty. Besides tuples and lists, there are dictionaries, but we're not going to get to dictionaries for quite a while. So math functions. We have lots of math functions. You want to take the logarithm of something, you import math, and then you got it. You want to get the sine of something? Yeah, sure, you can do that. Notice that these sine functions are in radians. That's not the way that, for the most part, most of us were taught how to do sine and cosine. You know, we think of 90 degrees and 180 and 45 and stuff like that. But instead, radians are based on values of pi. So if you want to calculate the sine of 45 degrees, you're going to have to use a function that converts from degrees to radians, and then you could call math.sine on it. Or you could write your own function that encapsulated that process. Oh, so there is no function for it, but to convert from degrees to radians, divide by 360 and multiply by 2 pi. I really thought that there would be a function for that.
It's simple enough.
Yeah, yeah. So adding new functions. We can add our own functions. If we wanted to sing the Monty Python song, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay, then we would use a def keyword followed by our function name, and in parentheses, and an end colon. So we could do that. Let's write a function, not that one. It's going to say hello, and it's going to take somebody's name. And so we're going to print hello, and then followed by a placeholder just to be all fancy, curly braces, and then format the name. Why do that? Just to get used to the syntax. Am I making things more complex than they need to be? I'm not sure. Y'all know how to use the print statement without things like that, right? You just print hello, end quote, comma, name. Okay, then I'm going to call my hello function. Hello, Bob Johnson. I hope I resumed the recorder. Good. So, hello, Bob Johnson. That worked. What if I want to make it so that it's optional whether to add that parameter or not? I can do that. Hello. This is going to be a syntax error because the function, which would be called a method if it was part of a class, blows up. Missing positional argument. Okay, so we can fix that. We can come up here and say name is equal to default. Well, quote default. Like that. Now, are we really going to want to say hello default? No, probably not. But just to demonstrate. So that's the line that I changed. And so when it runs, the first time it prints hello Bob Johnson. The second time it runs, it prints hello default. There we go. So that's providing a default value to a parameter. Why do you do that? Well, just like that print statement, it had a default value for the end, you know. That way, the vast majority of times, printing and having it go to the next line is what you want. But every once in a while, you may want to, print something and not have it. There are times in the Turtle library where you could specify a color, and if you specify two colors, then one of them means the border color and one of them means the fill color. Otherwise, it sets both of them to the same color. So that may be right, that may be wrong. Anyways, the idea is that you can make your functions have more flexibility by providing optional parameters. However, there are some exceptions. This would not work, so I'm going to delete it after I do it. Define hi first name equals Bob, comma, last name. Like I said, this isn't going to work, so I may wind up deleting it. Last name, like that. That flat out won't work. And then print first name, comma, last name. That should be a syntax error. Yep. And the reason why is because if you called it like this, hi, and your name was Cher, and you don't really know whether that's her first name or her last name. So, when we call Cher, what's it going to do? Is it going to treat her as Bob Cher? Or is it going to treat this as the first name and then not have a last name? You know, it's kind of an ambiguous behavior, so it's just not allowed. If you wanted to do that, you better provide default values for both parameters. So I'm going to take this out because it doesn't work. Guess I'll just comment it out. With my comment that default parameters cannot precede parameters without defaults.
What if you were to give a parameter to the last name, but leave first name default? If we had default parameters on both.
Well, if we're trying to force it to do what they don't want it to do, what you're asking for is how would we specify a first name, right? And then,
No, like the last names, like say, like first name is defined as Bob and Smith, and then you just wanted, when you said as the parameter you set, you just wanted to change the last name and leave the first name as Bob. Could
Yeah.
you do it without saying Bob Smith, or could you pull in the default first name and just change the last name?
I can't think of a way to do it.
Okay. I was just curious. I didn't know if you could like skip the first parameter and go to the second.
No, I can't think of a way to do it. That doesn't mean that there's not, but I can't think of a way. I think in that case what I would do is I would pass it in as a tuple or a list so that then it can determine what you were trying to do. And what do I mean by that? You could just enclose share, you know, comma, you know, or Bob Smith, whatever, inside a.
There's a better way to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so the return value of a function can be used as input to another function. Every time we call print with a function name, that's really what's happening. But let's just play and make a couple of functions that return values. We're going to call this one, sorry. Define Daffy, parentheses in parentheses. And what does Daffy do? He quacks. So return quack. And I really don't know what bugs does, so I guess he's just going to say carrot. So define bugs. Yeah, what's up, Doc? Okay. And he returns, yeah, what's up, Doc? And then we're going to write a function that takes those two strings and adds them together. I'm just going to call it add. That doesn't look like it's a keyword, so it looks like it's safe to use. And it takes two strings, S1 comma S2, and it returns those strings concatenated, meaning added together, S1 plus S2, like that. I'm sorry, pardon me?
You have an extra parenthesis in what's left out.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So then when we were going to call it, stuff is equal to add, giving myself lots of space, Daffy, the return value of Daffy from the return value of bug, like that. And then if we printed stuff out, hopefully it'll say quack, what's up, Doc. Probably without a space between them, eyeballing what's going on here. Yeah, quack, what's up, Doc. Quite often, you will return a list of values from a function. You would build your list and then print them out. I mean, not print them out. You would build your list, you would return it, and then whatever your calling code, whatever your client code was, could do something with them. So it's about our last thing for today. I want to write a function that returns a list of random values, as many as specified. So this returns a list of random ints. Parameter specifies how many. So I'm going to call this function randlist, R-A-N-D-L-I-S-T, and n is just going to be the number of them. And again, I know we're doing stuff that we haven't hit, and you know, for those of y'all who didn't take Python before, this is kind of a stretch, but it's like watching a tennis game. You know, you watch tennis before you start learning to play it. So we need to define an empty list first. L is equal to empty quote. Nope. L is equal to empty brackets, empty square braces. And now we're going to use a counter for C in range n. And you shouldn't use single letter variable names, but they're so seductive because they're easy to type in here. So let's get a random number. It would be, but then we would be calculating n plus 1 variables because range starts counting at 0. So, yeah, we could do that. Starting at 1, go out from, don't do that though. Good point. So our random value is equal to randint. We didn't specify what the upper limit should be, so I'm just going to make it 100. And then let's add that to the list. And gosh, I forget if it's append or add because I just used another language. So anyways, we'll find out. Pardon me? Okay, good deal. And then once we're done building our list, we're going to return it. Now let's call it print, parentheses, ran list, parentheses, and I want 20 random numbers in my list. Wonder if I managed to miraculously not make any syntax errors there. But y'all are good debuggers. Yep, what do you know? Required one positional argument. I forgot to specify the lower value. Silly me. Randint requires a lower value, a lower limit, and an upper. So I got to change this line right here. And I'm going to make randint parentheses 1 comma 100.
Mine ran and didn't have an error. It just didn't print anything.
That's interesting. Then I must have another error besides that. No, that one worked.
Oh, no, I'm using touch.
Okay.
Mine did. I'm using touch.
It should, the language should not behave differently on PyCharm, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so anyways, we have written a function that builds a list. We declared an empty list, then we had a loop. Each iteration of the loop appends a value to that list, and then we return it. And that's a perfectly cool way of handling series of data, you know. Can't think of a better way. Then you could do things like you could sort the list, you could find the max, you could find the minimum, you could calculate the average, you could sum them up. Yeah, let's use a few more built-in functions. Total is equal to the, oops, I didn't store that list in a variable, so I can't do that. Alrighty. Nums is equal to random list 100. Let's make them, nah, that's too many. 10. Now let's print the sum of that list. Sum of nums. And let's also print the average of that list, which is the sum of the list divided by the number of items in a list, which you can determine with len. So print sum of nums divided by length of nums, in parentheses, for in parentheses, in parentheses. And so our sum of our numbers, which we never even printed out, but I wouldn't take time to add them up anyways, was that, and the average of them, since there were 10 items in the list, is that. So again, we're using one function to feed another. Print is a function, so is not, sum, you know. len is a function. You can go nuts embedding functions if you want. Print the sum of ranlist randint 1 comma 10. All right. That's ridiculous. I don't recommend doing that, and apparently I have either too many closed parentheses or not enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. There. My goal in life is not to write as many statements or as terse of code as possible, because it doesn't really make much difference speed-wise. And if you cared about speed, you wouldn't be writing in Python anyways. So, but what's happening here? This is function is returning a value, and we use that value as a parameter for ranlist, and then ranlist executes a return to list, which we use as a parameter for sum. All right, so why don't we stop here? As far as homework goes, I didn't have everybody finish the last set of homework. What I'm going to do is just assign a reading assignment. Just finish reading our Trinket textbook, chapter 4. So let's make a Dropbox for what we just did today. And if you ever miss a day, just do the tutorial at home. You won't be counted off for it. Okay, so if you refresh your Dropbox, you'll see Dropbox C. And I'm just about to do another walkabout to make sure that everybody who's trying to get the stuff to work without syntax errors gets a chance to do so.